Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Unravel Your Mind. We're here to transform relationships to love and life. I'm starting a little bit early because I've had a little glitch with YouTube. It doesn't want me to select 11:11 anymore. But the show usually starts then. So I thought I would give a little bit of an update. Last week I was on the road and traveling from North Dakota down to Arizona, driving my mom for her winter camp, which is always super fun. And so I wasn't on last week. So I'm excited about this week because I've got so many juicy questions and I can't wait to get into them and answer some good stuff. I also have now with daylight savings, this really interesting ray of light. I guess it's here to connect me even more to source or just to remind us that we're always connected to source. I don't know. So I'm going to be kind of trying to avoid this this line. I tried to close my blinds, but just with the extra hour, it just hasn't helped me out here with my little studio. So hopefully we can get beyond that and just use it as a fun reminder. All right, so let's get right into the questions. And please, always, you can ask a question in the chat. You can submit it for next week if you're watching on replay, and I'm happy to get to it either today or next week. So let's jump right in. Question number 1. My wife is affectionate with our children, and I feel a little left out. At minimum, I'd like her to hold my hand at times. I don't want to sound needy or take away from our children, but I'd like some attention. What's the best way to approach? I feel like whatever I might say won't come across in a way she can receive. Yeah, I know. Sometimes women can be really challenging, can't we? I don't think we mean to be. And I think oftentimes what happens is when we don't feel that love connection with our spouses for whatever reason, we often want to really put that into our children or maybe our animals, our pets. And so it is indicating that there's a bit of a glitch in your connection with your loved one. So, and it can be a little bit of a challenge depending upon how long you felt like this connection is a little off. Oftentimes, we realize it and then we don't really say anything, and then it goes on and on and on. And then years go by and we realize, wow, I'm really disconnected and I'm not getting the extra attention that I need. And so I think it's so important as parents that you really hold the bond of the relationship of both the mother and the father, because that love is what also teaches your children what true unconditional love is, and everything that you're demonstrating is what's showing your children how they will probably most likely behave in relationships as they grow older. So, how to approach this with your wife? I think, first of all, just communicating, just saying, honey, I realize that it's been X amount of time, months, years, whatever. And I realize that we've just been so focused. And I think using we is also helpful. We've been so focused on the children that I realized that I'd really like to have some of our intimacy back. I'd really like to have just a little bit more affection. And I think when you just really say what it is that you're feeling, it allows the other person to have a reaction, right? It's not like blaming them for paying more attention to your children or not, but just communicating how you feel. Like, here's the behavior. I feel like we're not having the hand holding, the arm around each other as much as we are with our children, and I'd really like to have that with you. I think most women are wanting that physical affection and attention. And so if they're not receptive to it, just give them a little bit of time, because it just might be that they've just gotten used to it not happening. And sometimes women can get a little bit hard, like a hard shell around them in a way, like where they're like, yeah, I don't need that anymore. I don't need to rely on my husband or my man for that physical affection. If you're in that particular situation, hopefully you're not. But if you are, then just communicate. I think it's the best way to go about it. And if they're not open, give them a little bit of time and just stay on it, really in a gentle way, like just expressing your feelings and what you would like to see be different. and gently grabbing her hand and gently putting your arm around her, I think will make strides, even when she might kind of like pull away or feel a little bit shocked that the behavior's changed. I think women are pretty easily swayed back into being very affectionate because we actually do love that, and so do men, and that's why you're asking the question. And I so love that a man is asking this question. Okay, if there's any questions on that, please feel free to put it in the chat. I am super happy to have, we've got some live callers on, so that's wonderful. I'll look for your questions as we go along. Question number 2. There is so much talk about AI, and it's kind of scary to think robots will be taking over soon. What do you think about integration with AI? Should we do it to survive? Well, there's a lot here. First of all, I don't know how soon robots are going to be taking over. I do think it's probably sooner than we're thinking because there's so much happening right now in the AI world, ChatGPT, and that's of course not technically like a robot in our living room, but it is a robot in our computer, if you will, that is really growing at exponential rates. And there are robots, physical robots. In fact, I was just in Denver airport, I think it was, and I was in the United Lounge, and all of a sudden there was this robot that was going around the lounge as a trash receptacle, right? So it was going to different areas, waiting for people to put trash in them. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? You know, we're already eliminating a job for someone to be helping to maintain the physical presence and, you know, the trash and all that in the lounge. So we really aren't that far off. I think we hear from thought leaders like Elon about how the robots are right here with us, and the concerns that he has about all of this. He's also, been working on Neuralink, which is, if you haven't heard about it, it's, I believe it was so long ago now that I've read about it, but they're injecting into your vein here, basically a net that goes over your brain and is, I suppose, supposed to help you with neuroplasticity. I don't know exactly the way that it works, but I would say that it's absolutely not something we need to do. And the reason why I say that is because we have source intelligence, and source intelligence is the North Star. Source intelligence is what's creating everything, creating the illusion of everything, creating the illusions of us as humans, creating the illusion of robots. So if we want to go beyond all of this, we want to go back to that North Star. We want to go back to source intelligence. We talk about in our biology class about junk DNA, right? And there really is no junk DNA. Our bodies have a purpose for everything that's in them. Sometimes we don't know. Modern medicine doesn't always know what certain things are for. They think that there's no use for them. They think that the body doesn't use them. But when we start to look at things from a consciousness perspective, we start to look at life from an energy perspective, and we start looking at light coming into our body. We've talked about this before. When we're eating plants and we're eating light, that we are raising our vibration. Again, I'm not saying that we all have to be vegan or vegetarian, but there is an element to what we eat is creating what our vibration of our body is able to have and to hold. And so the filaments in our body, the DNA in our body, there's so much more that we can be doing with that. And as we raise our vibration and as we connect to source intelligence, we start to embody that wisdom, not just have access to it and like understand certain concepts or quantum physics or, different things that teach us in our mind, but we actually start to embody and feel it within. And that combination of expanding our intelligence and our consciousness through source intelligence is where the sweet spot really is, because there is so much more that our physical bodies and our consciousness together can do for us. So it's our soul sovereignty. It really is. I know it sounds like such a good idea to try to integrate. And yet, one of the examples that I like to give on this is, and it's a basic one, admittedly, but Electric cars, they sound great. They are great in many ways. And having a self-driving electric car, ooh, sounds even better. It can take me to work, drop me off, and then go to work and make money during the day, come pick me up, right? Sounds wonderful. Well, what happens when someone hacks the system and says all electric cars should drive to a point in, Salt Lake City or Cincinnati, Ohio, and all the cars go and pile up, right? So there's a mechanism there of control, and that's where we lose our soul sovereignty. You don't want to lose that. You have a net in your brain and a Neuralink or, whatever is going to be coming on the horizon, and you give up an element of that soul. You give up all of your soul sovereignty because you're giving up an element of control to a computer, to a system, to a program, another program, right? So that's all AI is programs. I completely understand sort of the scariness of this. But I think that what we really need to focus on is raising our own vibration, understanding the capacity that our own bodies, minds, and spirit, soul have, and really leveraging that. And that's why it's so important for us to wake up. And I don't mean just from sleeping at night. I mean into expanded states of consciousness. That is where we're at. That is where humanity is at. We need to get through the trauma, the wounding, the limiting beliefs, the social constructs that are not serving humanity anymore. We need to break through these, which is why it's all about breaking through beliefs to tap into our inner wisdom. So I'm more than happy to hear anyone's comments on that. I'm sure there's lots of people that are going to have some thoughts on that, and I'm happy to hear them and can respond more next week or today if you get it in the notes section. All right, so let's get on to the next question. Do you think psychedelics being FDA approved will also be made available for people who want to expand consciousness? Because not everyone feels they have trauma they need to heal. Yes, I mean, I think psychedelics are an amazing tool. I've spoken about this many times about the importance of building our spiritual toolbox, because psychedelics show us the North Star, but they're not here to enlighten us technically, because that enlightenment comes here in this dimension when we're unraveling our own minds, which is what this show is all about. Getting into those hidden belief systems, blowing them up so that you can expand your consciousness. Now, the question is very specific to the FDA. I think that I get this question a lot, of course, coming from a pharmaceutical background of over 15 years. I definitely have an opinion on this. I think that there is a lot of good that can come from having FDA approval. I think it brings a level of, I don't really like this word, but normalcy to psychedelics, in that a lot of people are still of the mindset that the FDA is an organization that is to be trusted. And, that's a whole nother discussion. So it will bring some acceptance to something that was viewed very negatively for many years, since the 60s and 70s and the war on drugs and everything that happened that shifted the narrative in a real downward way because it wasn't handled correctly. And so that's also a whole nother topic. I think FDA approval will allow for, within labeling, the use of it for trauma, suicidal ideation, PTSD, all of the indications that they're submitting for and the clinical data has been looking at. However, we know with medicine in general that doctors are practicing medicine. So what does that mean? That means that they have the ability to prescribe off-label. So if they see that there is a need for someone, they can prescribe something off-label, which would mean that it would make it more available for a wider audience of people if you're going the FDA approval route as far as a psychedelic. Sometimes the glitch is insurance, right? So if you don't have the code, the ICD-9 code for PTSD or for one of the conditions, then it can be harder and sometimes impossible to get coverage. So that would probably be another part of this that will play into the mix. But there's lots of people, lots of organizations working on insurance coverage. Now, with that said, there's still underground use, and I am not encouraging illegal activity in any way, but there are options. There are places that you can participate in organizations that are certified for certain psychedelics. There's some states that have decriminalized certain psychedelics. So there are options. So I think FDA approval will help us shift the narrative considerably. And there's certainly downsides, because being in a set and setting with a server or a shaman who has years of experience and ancestral lineage with these not pharmaceutical, well, I guess it's pharmaceutical, but if it's the FDA approved route, but I meant to say the psychedelics. If they have ancestral lineage working with these particular psychedelics, they have training, and they're providing a set and setting that's not sterile, but that's clean and sacred, and that provides a whole new set of opportunities outside of a clinical room that may not have the same sacredness. But I'm not going to say that it's better or worse. It's not. They're all providing great opportunities. So it's really about you feeling into what is the best thing for you. All right, let's go on to the next question. Even though I am aware of a trait that I have, avoider / overly self-reliant personality character trait, I want to change it, but I don't know how. Well, I see these as two very different things. So I see the avoider character trait a little bit differently, a lot differently than the overly self-reliant, but you're putting them together because both of them seem like they're a characteristic trait about yourself that you're seeing and you'd like to shift this. The avoider is all about you not wanting to be in touch with your own emotions, right? So you're avoiding having the confrontation because you don't want to be telling someone else how you're feeling, and or you don't really want to hear what they're feeling because you're not ready for it. You don't actually want to hear it. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to have the conflict. So that is, I think, a really important, number one, it's really wonderful that you have awareness around this, that you are an avoider, because sometimes it takes us years to realize that we've actually been avoiding something. So I think, first of all, pat yourself on the back for knowing that you are an avoider. Second, I would say push yourself to really feel into those moments where you go, oh, I just recognize that I'm avoiding this person, I'm avoiding this topic, I'm avoiding this subject, whatever it is, that you actually then break through in that moment and you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to lean into this. I'm not going to walk away. I'm not going to try to change the subject. I'm going to really sit with this. And if you're not able to, like, I know sometimes it's difficult. If you're not able to in that moment, that you really sit with yourself later and you just feel into it from a different perspective to see, what is it that I could be doing a little bit differently with myself and my interactions with others, so that I'm not continually avoiding. And I would also say, when you do that, tune into the person, because there's some people that are going to be a little bit safer space for you to have those discussions when you're sort of practicing this. So tune into that. Now, the second part, which is overly self-reliant personality. How do I change this? Well, first of all, I think asking for help, I think it's so basic, and a lot of times we don't do it because we see that as a weakness. And it doesn't have to be that you're helpless, right? Maybe there's just times where you just say, hey, can you help me grab my luggage down from the top of the storage container on the airplane? Or, oh gosh, could you help me with this? Or would you mind to just help this? Or whatever that little thing is. Like, start with the little things, right? And then start realizing, like, when they're bigger things and you're not asking for help, they're like deeply emotional things, because that's, I think, where this is connecting, is that deeper emotion of not wanting to ask for help. Asking for help. And maybe, I like to change the word, actually. I oftentimes stop myself from using the word help, and I use the word assistance. It really depends upon whatever vibration fits most for you between those two words, because some people might have a reaction to assistance. But I like to think that we're here to help each other and that we assist each other, right? That it's like, it's a team effort. And so I often reframe that as, asking for assistance, asking for someone to collaborate with me on something. And sometimes it's just genuinely saying, can you help me do this? Or can you help me see this differently? So I would highly encourage you to just practice again with people that you feel you can trust, right? Because if you practice with somebody who's harsh and who's going to just say stuff that's going to hurt you, it doesn't help you to sort of break through that pattern. And if you don't know who those people are that are safe to do it with, just try it. Just try. And you can always journal about it later. And that's the work, right? The work is actually doing it, moving it forward, and then reflecting on it and just saying, how did that go for me? Right? We don't do everything perfect the first time, although everything is perfect and divine. We do things and have reactions so that we can learn and we can grow. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm so happy to hear that this person is actually so in tune that they know that they're avoiders and that they know that they're a little bit too self-reliant. Because when we help others, how do we feel? We feel great when other people let us help them. So just, switch the lens a little bit and see how you might actually be helping a lot of other people feel really, really good by you asking for a little bit of help and not coming across as, so I'm self-reliant, I don't need you, right? People want to be needed. All right, next question. I'm seeing here on the chat, it says, does that person not like helping others? That's a great question. And I think that fit right in with what I was just saying, that I don't know for sure, but I believe that most people genuinely like helping others. So yeah, let's help each other, right? The more we can help, even when someone doesn't need help, maybe just making that effort to go out there and say, hey, I'd love to help you with this, right? It can be, even better if it's strangers. Hey, let me grab that crosswalk for you, that crosswalk button. Hey, let me pick that up for you. Like, I see that, you dropped that. All of those things, they make us feel like we're connected and in community. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for that comment. Okay, let's go on to the next question. I have an unconscious fear around intimacy and connection in relationships. I know how important it is, but feel it's important to build up my own foundation. How do I do this? So I think a lot of people, it's really interesting, isn't it, that a lot of people have issues with intimacy. And why is that? We could talk about sexual intimacy, we could talk about emotional intimacy, we could talk about a lot of different levels and types of intimacy. But it's simply because we've been hurt, right? And we're trying to avoid being hurt. And it's such an interesting human trait because all we want is to love and be loved. At the core of things, really, it is what A Course in Miracles says. It's either fear or love. It's based in one of those two things. And fear is just the fear of love, right? Of really experiencing love, being in your own love for yourself and for others, and not wanting someone else to take it away, which is impossible because love is within you. Other people are there just to reflect it to you. All right, let's get back to the question, which is about the unconscious fear around intimacy. Well, first of all, I think you are conscious of it because you're asking the question around it. So that's good. That's a really good sign. And the connection in relationships is simply the fear of feeling the disconnect in relationships. But when we know that we're always connected to people, no matter what the storylines are, we always have some level of connection to them. I think we can start to take off some of the chains and the concerns around being hurt by them, right? Because that is just a perception that, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not saying that people don't have the ability to hurt us, but it's really how we deal with the narrative around that hurt. Like, how deeply are we going to go into the storylines around what they did? And then she says, but feel it's important. I know how important it is, but I feel it's important to build up my own foundation. How do I do this? And that really is just being in you and your own self-love, like knowing that love is within you. I know it sounds so basic, and in some ways, maybe it sounds difficult, but it is so simple because you are love, and you are that's all you want to do is remember back to that source of love that you already are. You don't have to get it from somebody, you don't have to go anywhere. It's always there. It's just you wanting to get in touch with that. And I always find it fascinating. Each week I feel like there's kind of a theme that starts to run through, from various different people, these same kind of threads, because it's coming to me, the person's question before, is also about this fear of love and being in touch with their emotions. All right, let's go on. Okay, so because we tend not to want to do things, we don't like to be done to ourselves, maybe. Yeah, that's a great comment as well. Because we tend not, well, I think I'm reading that wrong. Because we tend not to want to do things we don't like done to ourselves. Yes, thank you. I love the comment. Okay, next question. I've never really built a solid sense of self, which I think has created a weak boundary, which allows me to be penetrated by other people. Actually, I think this is sort of a part two to that last question. I've never really built a solid sense of self, which I think has created a weak boundary, which allows me to be penetrated by other people. Any recommendations on how to be confident with who I am? I think it goes back to what we were just saying. It's all about self-love. It's all about knowing your strengths and knowing, some of your areas of opportunity. I'm not even going to call them weaknesses because I think they're set by you for you to learn. You've set these things up so that you can learn more about what it is like to be in love with yourself, in love with life, and having an experience that's positive. Yes, we have ups and yes, we have downs, and it's always about getting back to that blissfully neutral state. So I think for this person, the question from before was also very, very linked in. And maybe a simple practice could be for you is to write down in your journal every morning 5 things, 10 things that you love about yourself. We do not spend enough time reflecting on the things that we love about ourselves. Why we get programmed with these ideas that we need to nitpick ourselves and identify all the things that we don't think are good about ourselves. It's silliness. So every time you hear yourself say something negative, that negative self-talk about, oh, I'm not good enough or this happened, come up with the positive, because there's more positives than there are negatives. And the negatives are just there to teach you lessons. All right, let's go on to the next question here. How can we manage other people's energy? How do you know what's yours versus someone else's? If I'm in my power, how does that feel and work? Okay, so if there's someone in your life right now that you actually feel you're in your power with, just like there's a friend or a family member or somebody that comes to mind and you go, oh yeah, I really feel in my power when I'm with them. Feel into that for you. What does that feel like? Where do you feel it? How do you feel? And start taking that feeling, meditate on that feeling of feeling safe, that feeling of feeling vulnerable, but yet heard, of being able to be vulnerable, being able to share your emotion, right? And really feel into the energy between you and that person where you feel safe. That's your power, right? That's your power place. But what we want to do is we want to get to a place where we don't need someone else externally outside of us to validate us, to help us to feel that we're okay. It's okay that there's people out there that do that. That's great. I'm just saying that your question is about, your own personal power. So you want to get into your personal power so that it doesn't matter what anyone around you says or does. You just keep coming back to that blissfully neutral state because you know who you are. You know what you're here to do. Thank them for reflecting, something to you that is an aspect of yourself that perhaps you might want to tap into or tune into and go a little bit deeper for yourself. Why am I asking this person to reflect this to me? What is the lesson in there for me? How do we manage other people's energy was the first part of the question. First of all, we can't manage anyone's energy. I know that might not be exactly what you meant in the question. I think it's because in the next question, how do you know what's yours versus someone else's? You know. You just have to really start building that awareness in the moment, right? Because in the moment, we're just in the moment. We're having the interaction and we're starting to feel something. And maybe it's just like taking a deep breath and just pausing for a moment and just going, where do I feel that? Is that mine? The more we practice it, the not that it has to be quick, but sometimes identifying it right away helps us know right away, oh, that's mine, or oh, that's yours. You know how you feel like, oh no, that's not my shit. That's their shit, right? It's really just feeling into that. And again, it's very important that it's not from blame. It's not from like, oh, that's them. It's like, oh no, there's just an acknowledgement. So I don't have to take it on. I don't need to take on their energy. A really simple example of this is, let's say you're in a really good mood and you're happy-go-lucky and you're going about your day and you bump into a friend and they are just miserable, right? And suddenly you feel this change within yourself because you're starting to feel their emotion and your mood starts to change, right? So you don't always have to run away and avoid them. No, you can just say, oh gosh, to yourself, I get it. They're having a rough day. I'm not going to feed into their storylines, right? So the minute you start feeding into it, you start feeling what they're feeling. If you can be compassionate, which means that you're listening, you're hearing them, but you're not taking it inward. You're not making it your story. You're not getting so much into their story that then you're having to feel their pain. It's actually not that difficult. It just takes a little practice. So when you're standing with someone and they're having a bad day, you can acknowledge them for having the bad day. You can coddle them. You can everything you want to do to comfort them, but don't go into their stories. It's so important. Just have the awareness of that's the story that they're in right now. I am not in that. And I think that starts to help you separate like what's theirs versus yours, right? Is your listening skills and abilities to go, ooh, not mine, it's theirs. I mean, the example I gave is one that's a little bit more obvious because you're in a good mood and they're in a bad mood. And sometimes there's those grayer lines where it's a little bit harder to tell because you're having a conversation, but just catch yourself. How deeply am I in the storylines? And that will help you a lot. All right, let's go on to the next question here. How do I keep my heart open, be compassionate, and yet not allow it to take over? I often take it on as my own, and I want to stop that. Okay, so this was also a part 2 to that previous question. And I think we answered that. I often take it on as my own, and I want to stop that. Just don't get into those stories, right? Recognize that it's theirs and have compassion for them. But being compassionate does not mean that you are in their story, right? It's a really fine line there, and it's a really important one. Okay, let's go on to the next question. What's the difference between being critical and being helpful? And now this individual has given me a little bit of a scenario that I'm going to read, which will help be able to answer the question. But the question is ultimately, what's the difference between being critical and being helpful? I know sometimes my friends are trying to help me, but it sounds critical. Is this person narcissistic or just doesn't know how to communicate? Chances are they just don't know how to communicate, but it depends. Or am I being too sensitive? For example, I have a good friend who is often concerned with how I look. I stopped by her the other day after a workout and she was telling me how I should spend more money for my hair and what I wear, and telling me how I should try harder to lose weight. I did not defend myself as I believed she was coming from a good place. She just contacted me. Actually, I'm going to stop for a moment because it's so interesting because this really connects into a question a little while ago about, right? Some people understand the value of wanting to help others because it makes them feel good, right? So if you feel like she was coming from a good place, then she probably was just trying to be helpful because it made her feel better. Now, only you know because you were there, I wasn't. But if there was, and maybe you're going to go on to it a little bit more in this example, if there's the energy of, a tonality about it that feels like incredibly judgmental or maybe hurtful or comparative or any of that, then I think, well, maybe, I don't know if I would go so far as to say a narcissist because you would ask that, but I would say that there's someone who's very self-critical of themselves and now they're projecting that onto you. So either way, I would love them. And what I mean by that is I would, in my mind, thank them, and you can also say it verbally, but thank them for their contribution. Say, thank you. That's very kind of you. I feel you're saying that from a loving place. But I actually feel okay with myself. And, yeah, maybe I could take things up a notch a bit, but, I feel good where I am. So I think you participating in the conversation is helpful for them too, because sometimes then they keep going on and you're like, no, stop. So I'll go on with the individual's question here. She just contacted me to contact her friend's daughter because she thought she could help me. Okay, well, so maybe she's going a little too far, right? I told her I am not sure what I need to ask, so I will when I am ready. Okay, that's fair. You gave a response. You said, yeah, thanks. I'll ask when I'm ready to. She said I should ask her where she gets her beauty-related things done for the future. Sounds a little pushy, just a little bit from your friend. I have met her a few times. I felt uncomfortable calling her and asking something I am not sure what to do. I need to ask. Not sure what to do or need to ask. After I kept repeating myself a few times, she just sent a thumbs up emoji, which I felt a bit sarcastic. What do you think? I think you guys were just on two different pages. I think she just really wanted you to take her feedback and you were really like, why are you even giving me this feedback? Which is totally fair. I think it went back and forth, probably just a little bit too much. And then she was kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever, let me just thumbs up it. And, today's generation, especially, apparently, looks at that thumbs up as sort of like a, yeah. So I get why you're feeling that. And you're feeling a little bit of the sarcasm, but it might just be that it was just a little bit too much back and forth, right? And we're all trying to be compassionate about people that are giving us feedback or help or whatever. And sometimes it's just too much. It's just overboard. And again, I would just go back to let's just make it simple. Let's not go too deep into the storylines and just thank them either verbally or within ourselves of thank you for caring about me. Thank you for, sharing your thoughts and feelings about me. And if at some point it's too much to say, hey, thank you, I've got it, and you did do that. So this person is just there to push your boundaries a little bit just to see how far you can go. If you can, I would just let it all go. And if this person approaches you again and says, hey, did you call them? You just say, no, not yet. I don't feel like I need it. And just sit in that confidence because that's you. You don't need it from what I'm hearing you say. So just be confident about the fact that I'm just not ready for it. I don't really need it right now. And you don't need to provide any excuses, having any ideations around like feeling bad that, oh, they've asked me this. That's, I'm not saying this person is a bully, but that's bullying energy, right? And just don't allow yourself to be bullied by anyone because it's not, you know who you are, you know what you want, you know where you're at. And if it was a hurtful comment, about weight or about beauty or whatever, then just feel into it. Like, where are you? Are you okay with your weight? Then be fine, then love yourself for exactly who you are. If you have an insecurity about your weight, then do something about it, right? but we don't need to put a lot of weight on other people's thoughts about us. And that's the practice, really. That's the practice, is allowing people to share things with us through knowing that it's through their lens, but not making it ours, right? So isn't that beautiful how all these questions just all kind of string together with some hidden, hidden message, I guess, for us. All right. We're getting close to the end of the hour here. I've got a couple more questions. My son wants to cross dress, and I'm having a hard time accepting this. Do you think I've done something wrong to encourage this? Absolutely not. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know, what the upbringing is. I believe that there's a lot of souls coming in over the last, 5-10 years, and a lot of souls that have been here for a while that are opening up to expressing themselves in different ways. And masculine, feminine energy and balancing that within yourself is the key for all of us. Some people are going to want to have times in their life where they're a man and they want to swing over and cross dress and be a woman and express themselves and be feminine, and maybe come back to being masculine, right? And being a real masculine. But it's going to be because they're trying to be in balance. It's going to be because they want to be expressing themselves. We don't want to stop people from expressing themselves. What I would do, though, is I would sit with your son and listen as much as you can. As if they're willing to talk about it, listen. Ask open-ended questions, that aren't interrogative, that aren't like demeaning, that aren't like judgmental. Think about the questions before you go in. Different things are going to probably come out, but think about how you want to approach it. Because if your son feels that you're asking because you genuinely want to understand where they're coming from and how they feel, you're going to get a very different response than if you ask a question that's much more judgmental. Why do you want to cross dress? That has a judgmental feeling and tone to it. Honey, I see that you're doing some cross dressing and having some interesting experiences with other types of clothing and other types of self-expression. I would love to know more about what you're feeling and how does that make you feel when you're putting on whatever it is you're observing, high heels or, makeup or whatever. Like how I'm so interested to know as my son, how are you feeling? How does that make you feel? Try those conversations, because then they're going to feel heard. And then there's a time too where you might be able to provide some guidance that is, honey, out of concern, I just don't want you to be hurt. And socially, there's ideations around what men should wear and what women should wear. I'm not saying that you or I or anyone needs to subscribe to them, but a majority of society is. So I just want to have the conversation that as you express yourself in certain ways, there may be some backlash, right? So you can even have that conversation, because that really is, I think at the core of it, probably the concern for most parents is that you just don't want your child to be hurt. You don't want them to be, perceived as weird or odd or out of the norm. And you as a parent also have to come to a place where you really love them for whatever level of expression they want to have, because it could be a passing phase. It could be a long-term life decision. We don't know. But what we do know is that when we don't accept people for who they are in that moment, we always lose them. We lose some part of them. We lose some part of their trust in us because they don't feel safe. So be safe with your children when you're having these difficult conversations, and allow them to be vulnerable and share their emotions, share their feelings. Because when they do that early, then all the other questions that we had earlier are somewhat irrelevant, because they become so embodied in who they are and their expression of themselves that they don't let the external world be that big bad world of shoving down your emotional states of expression and happiness, right? Or someone's always, not always, but people are going to want to take away your happiness. And it's always up to you to preserve that within yourself and to know who you are, what you're here to do. So I would let them cross dress. I would just speak to them as much as you can, and I would love them as much as you can, and have conversations that might help support them and understanding, some aspects of how they're feeling. And I think that's going to be your best. But I would be very interested to hear if you do have these conversations, what comes back and any sticking points that you might have with your child as you do. So I'm very excited to hear feedback and comments. So please write in the notes for this week or for next week, and I'd be more than happy to have further discussion around this. All right. If you loved any part of the discussion today, I would love for you to give a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so that you get notifications when we're back live, 11:11 a.m. on Sundays, Pacific time. We're here to help unravel your mind and transform relationships to love and life. So I look forward to seeing you next week. And I so appreciate all the questions you've submitted. I appreciate you listening. You can always catch it on replay. And please, if you love it, share it with someone else. And I'll see you next week.